For my 29th birthday, I rented a beach house, stocked the fridge, and sent invites weeks in advance. No one came. 2 days later, my brother posted, "Family weekend vibes," at a beach 3 hours away. I remained silent. I just stopped paying Mom's mortgage, Dad's SUV lease, and the business loan they all forgot I co-signed. That night, Dad texted, "Did something happen?" I responded, "Yeah, I finally took the hint." Let me start from the beginning. 3 weeks earlier, I'd sent the invites. My parents, my brother and his wife, my sister and her boyfriend, cousins, a few close friends. Everyone had responded enthusiastically. Mom said she was excited to finally relax. Dad mentioned bringing his new fishing gear. My brother promised to help with the barbecue setup. I'd spent $2,000 on this weekend. The house rental, groceries, decorations, even a small gift for everyone as a thank you for coming. The first red flag came Friday afternoon when nobody showed up at the planned arrival time. I texted the family group chat asking about estimated arrival times. Radio silence. I called Mom directly, straight to voicemail. Same with Dad and my siblings. By Saturday evening, I sat alone on the deck watching the sunset, nursing a beer meant for celebration. My phone buzzed with a notification from Instagram. My brother had posted a story. The thumbnail showed him and his wife laughing on what looked like a different beach. I opened it with trembling fingers. "Family weekend vibes," read the caption. The location tag showed Clearwater Beach, 3 hours away from where I sat. The next story showed my parents, my sister, even my cousins. Everyone. They were all together, having the family weekend I'd planned, just without me. I scrolled through more posts. Mom had shared a photo of a sunset dinner with the caption, "Sometimes the best plans are spontaneous." Dad posted a fishing picture with my brother, both grinning widely. My sister uploaded a group shot of everyone around a bonfire. 23 people. The exact number I'd invited to my celebration. The realization hit like a physical blow. This wasn't accidental. They'd planned this. They'd all agreed to skip my birthday to have their own gathering without me. The coordination required was staggering. Someone had to suggest the alternative location. They'd all had to agree to lie to me. They'd watched me spend money and energy on a party they never intended to attend. I drove home Sunday morning in a daze, the untouched food spoiling in coolers beside me. The house felt different when I walked in, like I was seeing it through new eyes. Family photos on the mantle seemed to mock me. All those smiling faces who'd just collectively decided I didn't matter. Monday morning brought the usual routine. I opened my laptop to handle the automatic payments I'd been managing for years. Mom's mortgage payment. I'd been covering it since Dad's business struggled 3 years ago. Dad's SUV lease, taken over when he couldn't qualify due to credit issues. The business loan I'd foolishly co-signed when they promised it was temporary. $6,800 monthly, flowing out of my account like water. Money that had bought me exactly nothing, apparently. Not respect, not consideration, not even basic courtesy. I canceled every single payment. The mortgage payment bounced Tuesday. The SUV payment failed Wednesday. By Thursday, the business loan default notice would arrive. I sat in my office, watching my bank balance for the first time in months without that familiar sinking feeling. For once, I had money left over. Dad's text came Friday night, exactly as I'd expected. He asked if something had happened with the payments, using that careful tone that suggested he already knew the answer. I told him I'd finally taken the hint. My phone exploded. Mom called immediately. When I didn't answer, she texted asking what was wrong, claiming she didn't understand what hint I meant. Dad called next, then my brother. I let them all go to voicemail. The messages kept coming. My sister sent a long text about families sticking together through tough times. My brother called me selfish and unreasonable. Mom sent increasingly frantic messages about potentially losing the house. Saturday morning, I finally listened to the voicemails. Dad's voice was tight with barely controlled panic as he explained the business couldn't survive without my backing. Mom sobbed through hers, asking how I could abandon family over a misunderstanding. My brother accused me of financial blackmail and threatened to come over. The misunderstanding. That's what they were calling it. I drove to Mom's house that afternoon. The driveway was packed with cars, the same ones that should have been at my beach house the week before. Through the window, I could see them all gathered around the kitchen table, probably strategizing how to handle the crisis I'd created. Mom answered the door with red-rimmed eyes and immediately tried to hug me. I stepped back and told her I wouldn't be staying long. She led me to the living room, where Dad sat looking older than I'd ever seen him. My siblings flanked the couch like bodyguards. They wanted to know why I was doing this. Mom insisted the beach house thing was just a miscommunication. Someone had suggested Clearwater instead, and everyone assumed I'd gotten the message. Dad said the financial support was a family obligation, not something I could just withdraw out of spite. I asked who had suggested Clearwater. Nobody answered. I asked when this suggestion was made. More silence. I asked why nobody had thought to inform me about the change of plans. My brother finally spoke up, saying I was being dramatic about a simple mix-up. His wife nodded along, adding that family was supposed to be understanding. My sister chimed in about how I was punishing everyone for an innocent mistake. The gaslighting was masterful. They'd transformed from deliberate excluders into innocent victims of my unreasonable reaction. The narrative they'd constructed painted me as unstable, vindictive, using financial leverage to hurt people over nothing. But I'd seen the Instagram posts. I'd watched them curate their perfect family weekend while I sat alone with melting ice cream cake. There was nothing innocent about 23 people forgetting to mention a location change to the 24th. I stood to leave, and Mom grabbed my arm, begging me to reconsider. She explained about the late payment fees already hitting, how the business was hemorrhaging clients without operating capital. Dad mentioned possibly losing the SUV, which would complicate his work situation. The desperation in their voices was real. The consequences of my actions were hitting exactly as I'd intended. But underneath their panic, I heard something else. Genuine confusion about why I was reacting so severely to what they still insisted was a misunderstanding. That's when I realized the most devastating truth. They genuinely didn't understand what they'd done wrong. The casual cruelty of excluding me wasn't malicious in their minds. It was just natural. I was the reliable one, the responsible one, the one who paid bills and could be counted on to understand when plans changed without notification. I was family furniture. Necessary, useful, but not actually considered when making decisions about comfort or enjoyment. Update 1. The following weeks became a masterclass in family crisis management. Messages flooded in from extended relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Cousins who'd been at Clearwater suddenly remembered my birthday and sent belated wishes. Aunts called expressing concern about family unity. My grandmother, somehow dragged into the situation, left a voicemail about forgiveness and family bonds. The narrative had evolved. Now I wasn't just being unreasonable. I was destroying the family over pride. The story being circulated painted me as someone who'd had a tantrum about party planning and was now holding everyone hostage financially. Mom's mortgage entered default proceedings. Dad had to return the SUV and was now driving a 15-year-old Honda that broke down twice in the first week. The business laid off 3 employees, and Dad stopped drawing a salary entirely. My brother showed up at my apartment Wednesday evening, looking haggard. He said we needed to talk man to man about fixing this situation. I let him in, curious about his approach. He sat heavily on my couch and rubbed his face before speaking. He acknowledged that the Clearwater thing looked bad, but insisted it really had been a miscommunication that snowballed. Someone in the family group chat had mentioned Clearwater as an alternative. Everyone assumed everyone else had told me, and by the time they realized I wasn't coming, they were already there. I asked to see the group chat. He hesitated, then claimed he'd deleted it to save phone storage. I asked why nobody had called when I wasn't at Clearwater. He said they'd assumed I'd changed my mind about the whole weekend. The lies were getting sloppier, more desperate. But what struck me was his genuine belief that I should accept this explanation and move on. In his mind, the issue wasn't their behavior. It was my disproportionate response to a simple mistake. He shifted tactics, talking about Dad's health deteriorating from stress, Mom's crying fits, the family business potentially closing permanently. He painted a picture of collateral damage from my decision, innocent employees and family members suffering because of my stubbornness. Then came the real reason for his visit. They'd found alternative financing for the business, a hard money lender with brutal terms. Mom had applied for mortgage assistance and been rejected due to Dad's irregular income. They were facing genuine catastrophe, and somehow this was my fault for withdrawing support over hurt feelings. I asked him directly if he thought excluding me from a family gathering I'd planned and paid for was acceptable behavior. He got frustrated, saying I was making it about principle when real people were getting hurt. He accused me of being vindictive and small-minded, prioritizing my ego over family welfare. The conversation ended with him slamming my door hard enough to rattle the frame. Update 2. 2 months later, the consequences were reshaping everything. Mom lost the house at foreclosure auction. She and Dad moved into a cramped apartment across town, their belongings mostly sold or stored. The business closed permanently, unable to secure reasonable financing without my backing. Dad found work at a hardware store, making a third of his previous income. Mom took a part-time job at a grocery store, something she hadn't done since before I was born. My siblings quietly stopped posting family photos on social media. The extended family pressure intensified. My uncle called, explaining that I was being selfish and destructive. He offered to mediate a family meeting to resolve the conflict. Several cousins sent messages about disappointment in my behavior. My grandmother wrote a letter about the importance of forgiveness and family loyalty. But something interesting happened around the 3-month mark. The family narrative began shifting subtly. Instead of acknowledging any wrongdoing, they started treating the whole situation as a natural disaster that had befallen them. Something unfortunate, but not really anyone's fault. Mom mentioned in passing to relatives that I'd been going through a difficult time and had made some rash financial decisions. Dad told people that business conditions had become challenging, necessitating lifestyle changes. My siblings implied that I'd been struggling with mental health issues that affected my judgment. They were rewriting history, casting themselves as innocent victims of my instability rather than people facing consequences for their actions. The beach house incident was being minimized or omitted entirely from their version of events. I realized they would never acknowledge what they'd done. The admission would require accepting that they'd treated me as less important than their own convenience, and that truth was apparently unbearable. Christmas approached with no family invitations. I spent it alone for the first time in 29 years, ordering Chinese food and watching movies. My phone stayed silent except for a few automated holiday greetings. Boxing Day brought an unexpected visitor. Mom stood at my door looking exhausted, wearing a coat I remembered from high school. She asked if we could talk, just the two of us. I made coffee while she sat quietly at my kitchen table. She looked around my apartment, noting details she'd never paid attention to during previous visits. When I sat across from her, she seemed smaller somehow, diminished by months of stress and reduced circumstances. She started carefully, acknowledging that things had gone wrong between us, but struggling to articulate exactly what had happened. She talked about family being imperfect, about misunderstandings that spiral beyond anyone's intention. She mentioned how proud she was of my success, how much the family had relied on my generosity over the years. But she couldn't bring herself to admit they'd deliberately excluded me. The closest she came was suggesting that sometimes family members make assumptions about each other that turn out to be wrong. I asked her directly what assumption had been made about me regarding my birthday celebration. She fidgeted with her coffee cup, unable to answer. I asked if she remembered receiving my invitation, planning to attend, then deciding not to come. Still no direct response. Finally, she broke down crying, saying she didn't understand how we'd gotten to this point where family was torn apart over hurt feelings. She begged me to help them through this difficult time, promising things would be different if I just gave them another chance. Update 3. 6 months after my birthday, Dad had a minor heart attack. My brother called to tell me, his voice strained as he explained about the emergency room visit, the overnight observation, the medication Dad now needed. He mentioned the stress of their financial situation as a contributing factor, letting the implication hang heavy between us. I visited Dad in the hospital the next day. He looked pale and older, connected to monitoring equipment that beeped softly in the background. When he saw me, his eyes filled with tears, something I'd never seen before in my life. We talked for an hour about everything except the obvious. He told me about his new job, how different it was working for someone else after years of running his own business. He mentioned Mom's adjustment to apartment living, how she missed her garden. He asked about my work, my life, treating me like a distant relative catching up after years apart. As I prepared to leave, he grabbed my hand with surprising strength. He said he missed having me in his life, missed our regular conversations about business and sports. He told me he loved me and was proud of the man I'd become. But he never apologized, never acknowledged what had happened or why I'd withdrawn support. Even facing his own mortality, admitting fault was apparently impossible. My siblings took turns visiting me over the following weeks. Each approached the situation differently, but none could bring themselves to address the core issue directly. My sister talked about Dad's health scare putting things in perspective, about family being more important than past disagreements. My brother focused on practical concerns, suggesting we needed to find a way forward for everyone's sake. They all danced around the truth, treating my reaction as disproportionate while carefully avoiding any discussion of what had prompted it. The gaslighting had become so thorough that they seemed to genuinely believe their own revised version of events. I realized I was waiting for something that would never come, genuine acknowledgement of what they'd done and a sincere apology. They'd chosen their narrative and would stick to it regardless of consequences. The final piece of clarity came at Dad's follow-up appointment. The whole family gathered in the waiting room, and I watched them interact with each other. The easy familiarity, the inside jokes, the casual planning of future gatherings. They'd closed ranks after my departure, becoming tighter as a unit while treating my absence as unfortunate, but ultimately acceptable. I wasn't missed so much as my financial contributions were. They'd adapted to life without my support, found new equilibriums, made peace with reduced circumstances. What they couldn't adapt to was accepting responsibility for creating the situation. Sitting in that waiting room, surrounded by people who'd shaped my entire life, I felt like a stranger. We shared DNA and decades of history, but we understood family loyalty in fundamentally different ways. To them, loyalty meant accepting whatever treatment they deemed appropriate and continuing to provide support regardless. To me, loyalty required basic respect and consideration. The heart attack had been a wake-up call, but not the kind they'd expected. Instead of rushing back to restore financial support, I'd realized how much peace I'd found in stepping away. My bank account was healthier, my stress levels lower, my self-respect intact. Dad recovered fully, returning to work with dietary restrictions and medication. Mom adapted to their new normal, even finding some satisfaction in her job and smaller living space. My siblings rebuilt their lives around the new financial reality, and I learned to build a life that didn't revolve around earning belonging through usefulness. I started dating seriously for the first time in years, having realized how much energy I'd been spending on people who took me for granted. I made new friends who valued my company rather than my financial assistance. I planned a vacation for my 30th birthday, just for myself, with no invitations sent and no expectations disappointed. The family still exists around me, functioning in their established patterns. They gather for holidays, support each other through difficulties, maintain their connections. I receive updates through social media and occasional messages, watching their lives continue from a comfortable distance. They probably still don't understand what really happened or why I made the choices I did. In their minds, I overreacted to a misunderstanding and punished innocent people out of spite. The truth, that their casual disregard revealed how little my feelings mattered to them, remains too threatening to acknowledge. But understanding their perspective doesn't require accepting it. Some relationships can't survive the truth about what they actually are. Some family bonds are based on convenience rather than genuine care. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do for everyone involved is to stop pretending otherwise. I learned that being family doesn't excuse treating someone as disposable. Financial generosity can't purchase basic respect. And sometimes taking the hint is the healthiest choice available. My 30th birthday was quiet, celebrated with people who actually wanted to be there. The beach house was smaller this time, the guest list more selective. Nobody failed to show up. Nobody forgot to tell me about last-minute changes. Nobody took my presence for granted or my absence lightly. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely celebrated rather than simply useful. That difference, it turned out, was worth every consequence that followed my decision to stop paying their bills and start respecting myself.